Greetings and welcome. This is Coach Veronica Marie, and I am here this morning to chat a little bit more about conflict. This topic is so vast that we could spend days and years. There's libraries full of information about handling conflict, right? And so I take it piece by piece so that we can examine it through a small lens and then continue to integrate more information as we go. When we look at conflict, all conflict begins with inner conflict. There is something going on outside of us that isn't consistent with what we feel should be going on, right? And that causes a sense of energy stimulation, right? Belief systems come into play. And if we're not careful to fully examine what's really going on inside, inner conflict then begins to be conflict with others or interpersonal conflict. And so when the conflict is going on inside, it depends on the nature of the relationship, who you're talking to, and such. I usually come from a standpoint of intimacy when you are wanting intimacy with a person, because you may not want to use this strategy if you are not interested in intimacy. I don't walk around doing this with everybody, but there are some spaces that are really important to me where intimacy is concerned. And so then I would apply some or all of the things I talk about. So, looking at conflict from where it begins, which is the inner conflict, we understand that it's usually because there's a difference between what we think should be going on and what is actually going on. When we put that in the realm of being close to others and intimacy, there are a few questions that can help you neutralize the inner conflict so that you can actually have a discussion that brings forward intimacy. Any discussion that ends without feelings of closeness means that something was not understood either on one end or both ends. Usually, when a person is introducing conflict, the focus begins to be addressing their conflict. But it also is important to remember that with the introduction of conflict is another person experiencing some type of inner reality, which also becomes the outer reality. And so, if we only address conflict from the point of the person having the problem, not realizing that the person receiving the information may also develop some consequential problems, then we have not created feelings of closeness. And that leads to that empty feeling that happens after conversations where many people either suppress or agree to disagree, but there is a way to move without that empty feeling happening. And it begins with understanding the inner conflict, right? What belief system is activated? What do I feel should be going on? What do I feel shouldn't be going on? Next question: the thing that's going on outside, is it wrong? Did the person do something wrong? Did they treat me unfairly, unjustly, or in some kind of way that introduces some type of harm or ill will or malice? And that question is really important because sometimes we'll simply not like something, feel offended, or feel negative in some kind of way and begin to address the conflict with the other person without assessing whether or not something was really wrong. When you talk about intimacy, differences are allowed and should be invited if you want to be close, because otherwise there's barrier. There's divide, and that does not lead to intimacy, right? So, did this person actually do something wrong? Usually the answer is no. But if you are polarized in your thinking, meaning you're contracted or triggered, you're going to feel like it is wrong. But it's important to apply universal truth, right? Did this person act in some way against me? Now, I always talk about this next part, and it hits home right in this topic of a person's heart. How well do you know the person's heart? Because the second question is, what is this person's general heart toward me? Right? Because sometimes in a contraction, in a trigger, in a polarized thought, you can begin to move into polarized thinking about a person that you really want to be close to, which again hinders intimacy. So, number one, has this person done something wrong here? Number two, how well do I know their heart? How is their heart toward me usually? And do I think that has changed? Because a lot of times we change, right? Because of the polarization. And so we begin to see the person differently according to the situation based upon unassessed processes going on inside. So then that will lead to a divide or approaching conflict as if you're approaching an enemy or an adversary or adversarial energy rather than, hey, I really want to understand energy, right? I think it's really important, again, to self assess in these ways because all conflict begins within and then it becomes interpersonal. So if you want to be close, if you want to seek conflict, maybe not even come up at all interpersonally, you can begin by examining it within. What do I think should have happened? Is it wrong that it didn't happen? Right? Do how well do I know this person's heart? What is their heart like normally toward me? And do I think it has changed? If I don't think their heart has changed, what has changed within me from my normal way of being with this person? These are relevant and valid questions. Usually, when you ask these questions, you realize there was some triggers, some past thoughts, some programming, some autopilot behavior that came up and you began to apply it to this situation, right? Anytime a past program, past conditioning comes up into your present, it will not create the closeness you desire because it didn't create the closeness you desired in your past, right? And so lastly, when you're moving out of the interpersonal conflict, assuming that it became conflict and adversarial in nature, realize that aftercare is important. Number one, questions of resolve, questions of understanding of further conversation that needs to be had. Those questions are very appropriate there. Also, for the person who introduced the conflict, also understand that when the person introduces conflict, the one receiving it will need some self-care as well. Are they walking away feeling understood? Are they walking away feeling like the conflict was a place of growth, or are they walking away with a divide? That's really important. So there's aftercare for the person who introduced the conflict. There's aftercare for the person who received the conflict. But all in all, the aftercare really comes to understanding that persons you want to be close to, they're not your enemy, right? And polarized thinking will make it so. Unassessed inner conflict will make it so. I hope that makes sense. Listen, if you find any of these topics to be interesting and you want to go farther and deeper within yourself to understand your patterns and things you want to shift for your better experience in life, you can reach me on my website at veronicamarie.com. We can connect on social media. Just hashtag Veronica Marie. Something should pop up and you can follow those links there. Have a beautiful day. And I hope you do your self work here because it's really good, potent, deep self work for a healthier and a happier life.